Welcome to Film 5D, the show about everything film, now with the A1. I'm Aaron Hammock, and today we'll be comparing the newish Aputure LightDome 150 to its younger siblings, the LightDome Mark II and the Mini LightDome Mark II. Over the years, I've owned virtually every softbox that Aputure has come out with, from the original LightDome to the LightDome Mini, and now the three that we're looking at today. The great thing about these more recent LightDome softboxes from Aputure is their relatively compact size and weight, while also being easy to set up quickly. They're also nice and round, meaning you get a circular eye catch from the lights, which is pretty pleasant in my opinion. By the way, Aputure has not sponsored this video, and I purchased these softboxes with my own money, so all the views in this video are my own. I'm using the LightDome 150 for the talking head portions of this video right now, but also adding in a 4x4 white balance for fill, as well as a LightDome Mini Mark II on a 120D Mark II as a hair light back there. In fact, I finally got my hands on the LightDome 150 after pre-ordering way back in August, just a few months ago, and have been using it as my main softbox for the past several projects. Before that, I was using the mid-size LightDome Mark II with an additional 4x4 silk mounted to a light stand to get a nice soft key light for subjects. So I was hoping that this 150 would simplify my setup while also allowing me to control the key light spill with a grid. But is it worth the size and price? Let's jump into some quick tests comparing the three LightDomes to find out. For each of these tests, we'll be using the Aputure 300D Mark II light at various levels to compensate for the different softbox sizes. Now I have to admit here, I did my best to kind of match my skin tone exposure, but it's not perfect. They vary pretty widely. All right. Here we are starting off with the LightDome Mini 2, and this is at a power level of 50 on the Aputure 300D Mark II, and this is with no grid. And you can see the kind of spotlightiness of this light right off the bat. And it is even more enhanced, as you can see, the shadows on my face on the left side are much more stark with the grid on, and here we are again with the power level 50 and the grid, and you can see just what that light's doing, or the light modifier anyways doing. Moving on to the LightDome 2, so this is about double the size in terms of surface area, and here we are at power level 90 out of 100, and this looks much softer, or it's already looking much more like what a softbox should look like, with the wrap on the face on the left side. Yes, there's some shadows, but it's not too bad. We add the grid on, and it gets a little bit more stark, but we have a lot less spill happening on that background. So right now we're only using the one light, so there's no background light here, just to show kind of what the spill would look like if you use a grid on the LightDome 2. Moving on to the 150, is a power level of 65. There's probably a tiny bit more spill here, but the wrap on the face and the softness of the light looks pretty much the same. The grid, I would say there's less spill on the grid with the 150, and this is at a power level of at 100. I think the LightDome 2 was at 95 at this point. So you do need a little bit more light. And just for fun, let's compare my original setup on the right there with the LightDome 2 and the silk, and the 4x4 silk, to the 150. And you can see they're pretty close. I'd say I'd probably favor the one on the left, the 150 a little bit more. And then again, just for fun, the LightDome Mini against the 150, both with the grid. And you can see just the spotlight difference on the right versus the softness on the left. Okay, so just to get it out of the way, the LightDome Mini really stuck out like a sore thumb in those tests and was much more of a spotlight compared to the other two. I pretty much only recommend that using it either as a fill or a hair light like I'm using right now, or in situations where you just don't have enough space. Like for example, I use it on my 100X in the corner of my office, and whenever I do a Zoom call, I'll use that softbox there just because it's nice and small and fits in the corner nicely. Otherwise, it's not a super soft light modifier. But as far as comparing the LightDome Mark II to the much larger LightDome 150, I gotta be honest, I didn't see too much of a difference in terms of the softness of the shadows on my face. But let me know in the comments below what you thought. Now, granted, there is some difference, especially with the grid on, which is what I typically use when using a large softbox in a small studio like I am right now. I'm just not going to argue that it's worth the extra size and price. However, there are some advantages to larger softboxes. For one, because of the larger surface area of the light, you can afford to move the light physically further away from you, and thus getting it out of the way of cameras and stuff like that. Because the surface area is so big, you can basically be twice as far away and still have the same softness to the light. Also, the larger size makes it easier to key light two subjects at once. So if I had someone next to me here, we could light with just one single source using the 150. And you do have to be sitting pretty close together, and the light has to be coming from the same direction, so it's not going to work necessarily for a knee-to-knee interview, but it does work if the two subjects are sitting next to each other, like on a set or something like that. But what are the cons, in my opinion? Or what should you at least consider before buying one for yourself, assuming that you're in the market for one? Well, for one, the 150 doesn't come with a gel holder like the Light Dome and Mini Light Dome Mark II do. Now, this is probably because there's a lot of new lights coming out from Aputure that are both bicolor or even full RGB. So having and using gels is becoming less and less unnecessary, which I can appreciate. But again, unfortunately for me, although I have a 100X bicolor from Amaran, and I have two P60C RGB lights, and I have a P300C that I'm using right now to light the background behind me, my main key light is still the 300D Mark II. I don't really want to get a 600X or any of those other ones that can do the different bicolor, and therefore you don't need the gel holder. So in my situation, it's a little bit annoying that I can't ever switch it, at least easily, and put the gel holder on it. Now, granted, I could probably use the one that already comes with the other ones I have, but if you are buying this as a standalone, just keep that in mind. The next major issue I see is the weight and manageability of this thing. It's cumbersome to set up and move around, and I'd really only recommend using it outside, like actually physically outside, or in larger studios where you have a much higher ceiling. In my home studio, my ceilings are only 8 feet high. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze and kind of hard to move around or place anywhere, and yeah, it's a little rough. And also, you have to use a heavy duty light stand, or better yet, like what I'm using right now, a C-stand with sandbags on the legs to keep this thing from bowing over and tipping over and generally being unstable. I'd also only recommend using this modifier on higher end Aputure lights versus the Amaran ones, which have plastic locking mechanisms and are likely not going to be able to hold up to the weight of this thing. Now, this is personally a bit of a bummer for me, because one thing that I'm trying to do with my studio is replace a lot of my on-location lights, like the 300D Mark II, with a cheaper Amaran version that can be mounted to the ceiling. So I've already got P60Cs hanging up on my ceiling. I wanted to do that same thing with a key light with one of their cheaper Amaran lights, but this thing is not going to be able to hold that. Personally, I wish Aputure would release a light dome that is somewhere between the 150 and the Light Dome 2. I know that they have an Octodome 120, which is technically close to the middle of those two in terms of softbox size and surface area, but that isn't perfectly round, and I do prefer to have that perfectly round source like I mentioned before. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that the Light Dome 150 is worth the extra size and weight, or would you prefer a more manageable Light Dome 2? Let me know in the comments below. That's it for this week. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the comparison. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you're not subscribed, click the button on screen and hit the bell icon to receive notifications whenever I release a new video. If you want to see more gear comparisons from brands like Aputure, visit my blog on my website at filmin5d.com. Thanks again for watching.